Welcome to Founders Unplugged, hosted by Greg McCallum. Long-form, honest conversations with founders and entrepreneurs from around the world.
Okay, no pressure on my shoulder for sure. So, first things first, thank you so much for this amazing opportunity. I'm Soma. I suppose most of you know me as co-founder and CEO at ETA Technologies, but a bit of an obnoxious introduction about myself that if anybody checks my LinkedIn, which I do not recommend because it's not the most interesting read ever, but if you ever went there, you possibly see that I have experience on both sides of the coin. Once I was an entrepreneur, scaling up a company on the European horizon, having tremendous fun, Forbes 30 under 30, so on and so forth. We will discuss it in great details. And also, I have experience on the other side of the coin as a venture capital investor. Many people would refer to this as the dark side of the startup ecosystem. And pretty much what I am doing now is the combination of those two experiences, because after my entrepreneur years, while I was VC, I come across a pretty scary statistics that 23% of startups fail due to issues with the team. It's especially interesting because everybody among the investors, angels, family offices, venture capitalists, they proudly advertise that they invest into the people. And I started to wonder, why is that? We are living in a data-driven venture capital revolution. Why we haven't figured out a technology, a formula, a tool, basically whatever, to avoid this waste and quantify the people element properly. And in a nutshell, this is exactly what ETA Technologies is doing. The abbreviation is standing for our main mission, entrepreneurial team analytics. In a nutshell, that's how it looks like, but once again, we will talk about it significantly more. Just imagine an amazing opportunity is landing on your table. Everything looks great, the product market fit, so on and so forth. But how do you know that the founders really have what it takes to turn this idea into a potential unicorn, a 50x return, a 30x return, so on and so forth. And this is where we come to the picture. Our technology combines the power of psychometric testing and AI in order to provide our customers with a quantified overview of the team. But we don't just look for, the surface level management due diligence information that who is ex-Google or ex-McKinsey, so on and so forth, but basically focus on what really matters. Team chemistry, team dynamics, and how the different entrepreneurial personas can or cannot work together, and what it really means to your investment, what it really means for the future of the startup. And in a nutshell, after 2 minutes of elevator pitching, I suppose enough is enough. That's me, and that's ETA Technologies, and here I am.
And welcome. And it's awesome to have you, man. We've talked a few times in the lead up to this, because I just love what you're doing, and you've been involved in the scene for a while, and it's just it's super cool and very, very interesting. I had the episode just before that would have came out before this one, but actually, is this? I don't know. Anyway, it's a lady called Elisabetta. I advise you to go and watch that. She was also an immigrant to the UK from Italy, just like yourself. In fact, a lot of my guests seem to be. That seems to be a theme. And we were talking very heavily about the qualities of an entrepreneur, of a founder. So it's interesting because obviously I think some people maybe hear that and get a bit scared, right? Oh no, an algorithm's going to decide if I get investment. So can you explain a little bit more, like what really is, how is that working, and how is it maintaining sort of impartiality to a degree while also, being practical and really seeking out the core fundamental skills? And who's decided what those skills are, right? Because for some people it might be different. For some venture studios, which are going to be the main customer of this platform, they're going to be looking for different qualities or have a different thesis on that. So how are you going to balance all of this sort of stuff, do you think?
My goodness, I'm going to talk for a while, but trust me, it's worth it.
So let
me react to your first point that we are not a brokerage firm. We are not an investment advisory. We're never, ever going to tell that, hey, Greg, put all your money in. That's a sure winner, so on and so forth. We don't tell this. What we do, we reveal an additional, so far invisible level of information for the investors and allow them to make the decision. Nobody has ever made and never will make any decision just based on an ETA report. It's, part of the formula. Investors are expected, in fact, I always encourage them to check the financials, the pitch deck, wide variety of other information. What we do, we analyze this, in my opinion, extremely important slice of the pie and give you a quantified overview. So the algorithm is not making any decision. The algorithm is basically just revealing something what the investors do not necessarily see, because most of the VCs, they are either coming from an operating background or a finance background. And in my whole life, I've never seen a VC with a psychology or psychometric background, but I'm sure they exist. So there's nothing to afraid of. The reason why, and possibly that's the best way to answer your question regarding the fear, the reason why founders particularly liked what we are doing and they favored the technology, because even back when I was a venture capitalist, 200 or maybe 300 applications landed on my table every single day. I'm always saying that it's really scary, but it's true. Trust me. We spend average 38 seconds on a deck. 38 seconds, period. And as a result, 99% of them get rejected, and we forward a few to the portfolio manager, and they will decide that, okay, I'm going to invite these two guys. Meanwhile, it's not really my cup of tea. Long story short, you never ever get the feedback. You, as a best case scenario, you get an email saying that, I don't think so. It's not my cup of tea. And this is a particular bit which the founders really like in our technology, but that we don't just give them basically a blind score that, okay, you are 5 out of 10, do whatever you want with it. But we provide instructions and recommendations and suggestions that, okay, how you can exactly improve your team performance to make sure that, indirectly you are improving your investability as well. Impartiality and who's deciding what are the factors. Of course, it's absolutely a key. And if you don't mind, a little story from the early days of ETA Technologies. So the idea to implement psychometric testing in a venture capital environment, it's absolutely not new. Many people tried, even more failed. And we had a profound idea with my team in 2022 that if you look around, you find 75% of SP500 companies use psychometric testing in some shape or form in order to identify the best possible talent for hiring. Why on earth we don't use this insanely powerful technology in the investment decision-making process to identify the highest potential entrepreneurial talent? And the reason is very simple, because it's really difficult to implement it. I'm sure you come across Myers-Briggs, Hogman assessment, so on and so forth. There are wide variety of them in the industry. One is better than the other, and there's a spectrum of opinion about them. But long story short, none of them can be directly implied in an entrepreneurial environment, because everything what those guys did over the last 150 years is trained on a corporate environment. And, I don't think I need to tell you or our audience that the corporate and the startup environment is completely different. And as such, from day zero, we realized that if we want to be successful with this project, we need to create our own psychometric test. And, as a serial entrepreneur, I'm a big fan of the idea that if you don't know the answer, just ask your customers. Simple as that. And this is exactly what I was doing. I went on 150 so-called customer interviews with VCs, angels, syndicates, so on and so forth in the industry, US, UK, and mainland Europe. Just asking them 2 questions. Number one, validating that there is a need for this product, that, hey, do you invest in people? If there were a product which was doing X, Y, and Z, would you pay for it? Because validation is everything. And number 2, if you really invest into the people, if you really believe in this, tell me about the qualities, what you are looking for, what you want to measure, so on and so forth. And as a result of this 150 customer interviews, we basically reverse engineered our own psychometric test. It comes without saying that I'm not the smart one in the team, so I had nothing to do with psychometric testing. Actually, these were my co-founders, who, especially Ben, our product guy, who has a PhD in psychometrics. So he was doing the heavy lifting. Nevertheless, I provided him with the information that what are the points what we are measuring. And regarding the impartiality, it's very important that everything what we do is focusing on the team. So we never say that, hey, Greg, as a CTO, fire him and everything shall be fine. We don't pinpoint to individuals. We don't analyze individuals. We analyze the team together as a formula. And once again, startups have nothing to worry about, because many times I get that, oh, what if I am the problematic one? What if I am the black sheep? there's no such thing as a black sheep in a startup. You need to learn how to work together, because if the project is successful, trust me, you're gonna spend a lot of time together. I mean, co-founder commitment, it's like a marriage, man. It's crazy. And once again, regarding the impartiality, everything is anonymized, everything is focusing on the team. What you can get as a worst case scenario is a feedback how to improve your team and make it investable. That's the worst thing that can happen to you.
Yeah, no, that's a great explanation. And I think that's important to point out, isn't it? Because of that could absolutely be a concern otherwise, hearing what you're doing. So that's good to address that. So is it fair to say that they're, depending on industry and maybe location and things, that there might be some variances as well as to what maybe people are looking for from the team dynamic, from the team sort of from an assessment perspective? Will there be some changes there?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Absolutely. It's Greg, it's a brilliant point that, comparing a software as service startup to a biotech or medtech, that's an absolute recipe for disaster. You need a different skill set. You need a different mindset, a totally different attitude towards the product, different resilience, different risk aversion. So that's why it's so important that, what we are doing. I'm not saying that it's industry specific at the moment, because we need to gather a lot more data, but we definitely differentiate between startups where you need a heavy domain knowledge, like medtech or biotech, and when you don't need such a heavy domain knowledge. What comes into my mind is, for example, a software as service solution or maybe e-commerce. There's nothing wrong with them. E-commerce businesses are absolutely amazing, and they are generating a lot of money for investors and for the founders as well. But given the amount of support what I have in the ecosystem, like, for example, a Shopify account, and so on and so forth, I can create one with very limited domain understanding. Meanwhile, if you want to create a cancer therapeutics company, you need at least two guys who have a PhD in this field. So we definitely differentiate. Even more important, in the testing process, we differentiate between technical and non-technical co-founders, because that's another interesting point, that if you try to measure them, with the same system, once again, that's a recipe for disaster. And that's why it's so important. When we start the process, we always ask just 3 information about the co-founders: name, title, and email address. And, the writing on the wall, it's an online assessment. You need the name and the email address, quite obvious. And sometimes people ask me that, why the hell do you need my title, whether I am a CEO, a CTO, a CSO, whatever? The reason being, because the system is smart enough to differentiate between, technical and non-technical co-founders, which is absolutely essential from an assessment perspective.
And then I suppose, like you said, it would also then take into account the industry, etc., as well, and make some change. Some changes
absolutely,
there.
absolutely. Absolutely.
But that's, it's a very valuable tool, because like you said as well, not just for the investment side, so that they can use that as an addition to help with decision making. So just to reiterate for those watching or listening, as you rightly pointed out, in the same way that we would be for recruitment, it's not to say hire this person, don't hire this person. It's just as an additional piece of information for the puzzle, right? But like you said, which is really interesting, is for the actual founders themselves, for the actual entrepreneurs themselves, to be able to get an understanding, because presumably from there they could look at that and go, actually, now that we're seeing it sort of out on the table like this, maybe we do need to improve this area. Maybe we do need to go and hire an advisor or bring in another co-founder or whatever it might be. It could actually help them with that sort of stuff too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And this was an aim with the product. Just a funny story from the early days of ETA. So when we came up with the first iteration of the product, from the investor side, everybody was cheering that, this is really good. I understand the assessment. The reporting system is quite clear. It's giving me quantified information. However, we made such a classic mistake that we were just focusing on the customer, but not the user. And in the first initial tests, 90% of the users, they hated it. The startup said that, look, it's just long. It reminds me of those corporate psychometric tests, which trust me, I don't have any fond memories. And last but not least, okay, I complete it. I invest 60 minutes of my time and I complete it. Let's suppose what I'm going to get in exchange for my time. I understand what's the value proposition for the investors, but why I am doing this. And this is when we realized that, okay, we need to get back to the blueprint and basically redesign the technology. And this is where we came up, for example, the double data gathering system, which allowing us to, that a single founder is spending like 10-15 minutes, just 10-15 minutes with the assessment. We don't need like an hour of your time. And this is where we came up. With this feature that we are giving recommendations and suggestions, not just a simple score, because meanwhile, from an investor standpoint, you just want to see, okay, check, 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 check. From a startup standpoint, in order to generate your value, we must give you more than just numbers. We must give you something that, okay, what's the feedback, how I can improve? Because I think this is a big lesson from the industry that startups are super coachable. Founders are eager to learn. Founders are always there to say, okay, I don't mind the rejection, but tell me why I'm rejected. Tell me more. Tell me how I can get better, how I can improve myself, how I can improve my product, my team, so on and so forth. And if you give them something, they will appreciate it.
Absolutely. And then they'll usually come back swinging, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, very valid point. I think, and that's usually the biggest frustration for most founders that I'm sure you've spoken to, and you know all too well, and myself, when it, like you said, when you just don't get that feedback from investors, it's just very disheartening, because you live on feedback. You spend sometimes years getting feedback from your customers and everyone else around you, and to just hear and know thank you is especially sometimes when it can be a very lengthy process, to just get no or nothing. It's it's pretty much a kick in the nuts, isn't it, at that point? So
Yeah, absolutely. And from a venture capital standpoint, I mean, many people love to blame that, oh, those venture capitalists, I submit my deck, I submit whatever, and they just give me a cold rejection. I don't want to defend them, but sitting in their chair, I understand why is that, because when I'm saying that 200 or 300 pitch decks landed on my table back when I was working in VC, trust me, I'm not lying. We are under a lot of pressure to find the appropriate companies who we would like to move forward with, who we would like to invite for, just a pitching process. So there is an inability, a natural inability in the industry, which is coming from the volume, that it's not possible to provide feedback. And I think that's why our formula that we give you some feedback, it's so much celebrated by all the entrepreneurs who we had the privilege working with.
Yeah, and it's a really important point, to try and keep things into perspective across all of the journey as an entrepreneur, or in general in life, to be honest. But that reminds me of an event that was the demo day, the Rare Founders demo day. That was, earlier this year. So when I was there, I remember I was sat watching a panel or a talk with Mark Cohen, Unbundled VC. And he was being interviewed by someone from Seed Legals, I think. And someone in the audience asked a question, and it was you could tell this guy was very bitter, right? He was, every now and then you just find this founder that's just like, oh, okay, yeah, you're one of them. And he was clearly very pissed off, and he was just like, what is it that VCs can do to, why can't they improve it in, some way to at least, to make some sort of effort to provide feedback? And everyone was kind of like looking to be like, dude, like, first of all, we don't owe you anything, because of the way he was saying it was pretty, aggressive and so on. And then he explained exactly what you just explained. And it's like, it doesn't take much thinking to just sit down and figure that out, really. Like, if I'm sitting on the corner and saying, hey guys, free money, I'm going to get quite a lot of inquiries.
I'm sure.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So, like, come on. So there was it was quite interesting. It just reminds me of that I think there needs to be a bit of perspective sometimes. It's like, yes, it would be nice to get some feedback, and yes, it would be nice to have more than like 30-40 seconds to be considered. But the reality is these organizations are huge, with enormous amounts of information passing through them. Another criticism of his as well was that quite often those reviewing, he was being quite mean about this, actually. He said quite often those that are reviewing it are just, stupid idiots straight out from college. They've got no idea. They've never run a business in their life, and they're judging my business. And I was like, okay. So, and I think even Mark said, well, what would you prefer? Would you prefer that people like me were the ones reviewing it every time? It's like, yes. It's like, okay, well, think of how that can work practically. there are only 5 of us in a VC firm, and you want us to review every, like you said, 300-400. You know what I mean? It's like, we just need to think a little bit logically.
Yeah, yeah. To be fair, there's a lot of criticism against venture capital, and I think it's coming from partially the perspective that still, if you ask founders, and I don't want to make up any statistics, but I bet 100 to 1 that if you ask 10 founders, 5 of them are going to just say that, okay, why you need a VC funding, why you need a VC to be on your side. They're going to say that because of the money. So they see these organizations as a money bag. And in reality, a venture capital founder relationship is much more. I mean, I remember when I was sitting on this side and the other side of the coin. A good VC is literally like a marriage. They support you, they open you doors, they use their black book of contact, they give you strategic advice. Because what many people, I believe, underestimate that how difficult it is to scale a company from a people perspective. Because I know, rather say I have the privilege knowing people who are amazing, building a business from 0 to 1. They are the classic visionaries, the garage guys, assembling a really strong team, figuring out like a perfect product market fit, building that product, selling, and just making sure that the company is reaching a certain level. And from that moment on, when actually it turns into like a seed or a Series A business, something what many people say that, okay, it's not a startup, it's like a proper business. People are showing up in the office with a tie. They don't enjoy it anymore. They just say that, okay, I want to quit. And many stories what you hear in the industry, people build extremely successful businesses, and at a certain level they just quit and said that, look, I like everything, but this is not my environment. And I think that's another point why ETA is such a needed product, because you need people who are able to cope with the pressure, and you need the right people, the right chemistry, the right team dynamics in each and every one of the part of the journey. And you need, from a team chemistry perspective, something completely different when you are a garage startup and when you are Series A. And that's why it's so interesting for me that at the moment, you mentioned recruitment a couple of minutes ago, we are trialing a recruitment project, basically where we try to just do a scenario planning for recruiters.
Hi, a friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like, and subscribe. And if you are feeling really supportive, please consider reviewing the show on the podcast platform of your choice. It all really helps support what we do. Thank you. Now back to the show.
That, after Series A, it many times happens that because of some reasons, you need basically a different person to lead the company. Not necessarily a different face, but a different person to be there and take care about the operations.
A different set of skills,
Exactly.
a different psychological makeup, a different attitude. Yeah.
Exactly. And this is one of the most difficult decisions from a recruitment perspective, finding that person. Because, when you get CVs, everybody's a 5 out of 5 star candidate. Everybody is an ace. Everybody is a joker. But how you decide that I want person B and not person C? And this is where we try to come to the picture that we analyze what so far carefully crafted team chemistry is there, and how this chemistry is going to react if you add a new element. Literally like chemistry. I'm talking in scientific terms, but
there's a reason why I really, really wanted to speak to you on this show, because that is what I was doing for a very long time in my career as an advisor, working with organizations. But I was doing it very analog and manual, with my own sort of assessment of because I studied sociology and I've got a deep interest in team psychology. And I've seen firsthand the impact that one hire can have on an entire company, that is, if it's just mismanaged, and especially at specific moments in time, because you've not only got the team psychological makeup on an individual, on a group level, on separate group levels, but then you've also got the pressure and timing that's currently running through the business, and there can be moments of extreme inflection, of extreme stress, or downward trends, upward trends, whatever they might be. And so a team that could be incredibly stable on most days of the week suddenly can become incredibly unstable at a moment of extreme stress. And so all of these variables sort of come in, and you have to try and calculate, okay, well, if we get one person in, let's say, with a slightly egotistical look at view, or slightly narcissistic viewpoint, while it might be bearable for most businesses who are doing fine, if we put them in at that particular moment with that particular group of people, it will destroy the entire company culture, and the business will close in 1 year. Like, you can make those pretty well-informed decisions. It's like, okay, and you do that just because they're ex-Google or ex-Amazon, and you need that sort of, maybe figure something else out. Take your time. Like, but it's massively interesting. And I find, because of that moment in time, like you say, that seed to Series A timeline is incredibly fragile. And like you say, a lot of founders quit at that point. A lot of them fail, and a lot of the businesses don't make it past that point, because it's an extremely volatile time. There's a lot going on. People think that the beginning 0 to 1 is hard. Actually, I think that 1 to 2 is the hardest, to be honest.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Both from my experience as an entrepreneur and from venture capital experience as well. That many people say that, seed investors, they don't take much risk because they already see that, something is working, they generate revenue. I just pump up the whole infrastructure. I just pump 10x money behind it and everything will be fine. But this is not reality, because the amount of change what's happening, I mean, it's not, linear, that I have 2 people in the garage doing X and I have now 4 people doing X, because those 4 people are doing not X but Y, and Y on steroids. Because when you are systematically growing, you are conquering a new market. I mean, many people use the seed money to go, for example, to the US market, or I'm going to approach the European market. And everything is happening all at once. And you need a really strong and stable management team in place in order to just keep the excitement on the right level and keep the operations on the other equally appropriate level. Because if one or the other is actually going in a mismanaged direction, this is where you see a proper recipe for disaster. Either a startup starts selling something which they cannot deliver, or even worse, they are just sitting on opportunities, being way too risk averse. And instead of, jumping into this, they're just planning and planning and planning and planning and planning. Investors are running out of money. They are running out of patience. They are pushing them too much. They're making decisions they're not comfortable with. And this goes on and on and on and on and on. So it's extremely, extremely important to, manage the people properly. And even more important, to identify who are the people who can be managed properly. And it's not by chance that many people, and in my opinion, the best VCs, they call venture capital the most people-centric business on planet Earth. It's even more people-centric than human resource management itself.
Oh yeah, well that's obvious. If you know anything about HR.
Why I have a sense that there is a story behind this agreement.
I think most people will agree with that. But you're absolutely right. I mean, I think this particular area in the startup world is extraordinarily interesting. Like everything that you're doing, but also I have a hugely deep interest, and I think a lot of founders should also have a deep interest in this specific thing that we're talking about, and this very specific moment in time for a business, because it reveals a lot about the truth behind what it's like to scale a successful business. And it's really very, very complicated at that time. And while there are so many founders that I meet that I think I meet them and I go, I think you could absolutely, hit the ball out the park and build this business. And the same token, I very rarely meet those that I think could get past C, that have what it takes. And, I think there has to be something. We have to think about, okay, well, how can we give people the tools that they need in order to do that? I think we spoke about this before too. Like, I've got quite strong opinions, I think, I do think that VC has something to answer for maybe putting a bit too much pressure in terms of money and time, speed of getting results sometimes, on founders and founding teams at those stages or those later stages, and not providing an enormous amount of support and resources in order to upskill in order to accomplish it. I think that is something that is missing, and I spend quite a lot of my clients I do work with to upskill them for that particular thing. A lot of my clients are founders at C to Series A, specifically to upskill them so that they don't get themselves out of a job. They don't make themselves redundant, because it does happen, right? Quite a lot of the time. The board can sit around and go, sorry man, you're not it. You've not upskilled, you've not developed as a professional to the point where you can continue to lead this company. So it's like, trying to predict the future a little bit, what you're going to need to be further down the road, because your entire skill set is different, but also the responsibilities are taken away from you too as well. And I think that's a difficult pill to swallow as someone that initially had to run everything, to suddenly just be like, oh, okay, now I've got other people to do this shit for me. It's like that's weird. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a paradigm in the industry called the rich versus king. I don't know whether you have ever come across with it, but this is something which we partially incorporated in ETA Technologies. And the rich versus king is standing for basically just a very interesting comparison. By the way, before I reveal everything, there's no right or wrong answer here, but there is one way how you can mess it up. Basically, the rich versus king are two stereotypical entrepreneurs. The king is someone who's really comfortable, giving up power, giving control to a board, advisors, non-executive directors, investors. They're not really saying that, I want total control over the company, but what they believe in, that I rather have a 1% in a $2 trillion overall valuation company than 50% in a 1 million overall valuation company. And it comes without saying that the other persona is completely different. And what we are testing against, that once again there is no right or wrong answer, because you have seen extremely successful unicorn founders who belong to the rich and who belong to the king category, so that there is no such thing as, oh, you must follow this blueprint and everything will be all right. However, if your team, if your co-founders are misaligned with your vision, this is a big problem. And don't get me wrong, investors, it doesn't matter, angels or VCs or even private equity firm, they do appreciate the diversity of thinking. They do appreciate that if you have a different opinion around the board and you challenge the others, because if everybody is always on the same page, that's a massive red flag. However, if you are in the same boat but you are rowing in a different direction, that's equally a massive red flag. And that's why it's so important that when we see the rich versus king dilemma, either your whole team must be on the rich side or your whole team must be on the king side. And this is the reason why I really like this test, because it's really simple, but it is telling you more than many other things in the industry, that are you really aligned? Are you really thinking that in 10 years' time we will have an IPO? In 5 years' time we will be here. In 2 years' time we need to raise, but until this point we are doing the bootstrapping and we are doing it 200%. And those are really difficult questions and really difficult decisions to make. And you can make it if and only if everybody is united behind one vision. And you would be surprised that, as I'm describing it, I'm sure many of the audience say that, it's easy. You just need to be on the same page, right? It's easy. There's nothing wrong with it. Who would mess up this test? 70% of the teams who we are testing, we detect not just some surface level misalignment, but really serious misalignment. Obviously, we are not asking them the question that, hey, are you aligned by the vision of the CEO? But we are asking them, differently. But this is a massive issue, that people under the same umbrella, they are building a whole different company, a whole different vision, a whole different mission. Right. And this was so crazy for me when I first, read the data, and I was like, I mean, this cannot be. This is impossible. But I'm telling you, 70% we detect founder misalignment, which is madness.
Is that what do you think that's down to? Is that just down to the fact that maybe with very early stage organizations, those teams just don't see that as an important thing to have to concern themselves with at that stage? They think we can get aligned on that later, like, because it's just so many unknowns. Or is it indicative of a CEO predominantly that isn't maybe very good at communicating vision and getting people on the same page? Because ultimately it's their responsibility to a degree, right?
Disagree with it. I would disagree with it.
Okay.
If I need to name the core of this issue, I would say one word: communication. If I can say two words, I would say internal communication. I don't necessarily say that, as a CEO, it's your ultimate responsibility to create a vision and make sure that everybody is united by it. It's rather your responsibility to create a conversation which, as a result, will create this whole mission and vision statement. Because I believe that if you, and for sure, there are many examples like Steve Jobs. Obviously, he was different because he created the vision, and if you were not part of this vision, you became terminated very, very, very quickly.
But that's a unique case of a visionary CEO. There are visionary CEOs who are just adamant that it's like, this is absolutely the way we have to do it.
Yeah, but the most successful teams who I see, it's basically what they have is an absolute fantastic internal communication, and the CEO, the visionary, the founder, whatever you want to call him or her, their responsibility is to make sure that people are not just sitting, in a corner working on their own stuff, but opening them up,
bringing them into the conversation.
Exactly, they are involved,
facilitating that across the company.
Yeah, and that's why one of the key metrics what we are measuring with the psychometric assessment, it has a really weird name, and I always get this question: okay, what the hell this means? Entrepreneurial persona collaboration. And I get it so many times that, okay, entrepreneurial persona, I understand that it must be referred to something that how entrepreneurial an individual is, right? But entrepreneurial persona collaboration, what the hell is that?
That makes sense to me. How the various personas can fit together.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And once again, it's magical that we speak about startups, speak on entrepreneurs, but so many times, so many times we find that this absolutely essential element of the puzzle is just not there, because people can work together. They have a good chemistry, like in corporate, but this next level is still unlocked, where the entrepreneurial personas are able to work in harmony, where, using your analogy, everybody is brought to the conversation and they're creating something which is equally comfortable for everybody and something which they equally can support with their entrepreneurial spirit. It's so rare, but it's so essential.
Yeah. How many co-founders do you have? What sort of team size do you have?
Oh, we are a co-founding team of 4, and with three board advisors. And how our dynamics looks like that, obviously ETA Technologies is a type of startup which requires, a heavy domain knowledge and expertise. So it's not by chance that 2 of our co-founders are coming from research and academia, and they provided, what was necessary to create the psychometric assessment, to create the double data gathering system, the behavioral analysis, so on and so forth. We have Chris, who is a senior software engineer on our end, and basically he created the product. The others basically put the formulas on a napkin, and he created the product which is actually operating and what we can sell. And we have 3 board advisors. We are extremely proud of them. They are amazing. They are super experienced and supporting us with everything what we can wish for: the black book of contacts, the connections, the strategic advice, which is absolutely essential in our case. And last but not least, it's my responsibility to do the talking, and that's basically how I'm on the podcast. Me and the others are working hard. I'm on the podcast.
Yeah. Hey man, this is why we like to be CEOs. We just get to sit around, drink coffee, and talk shit. That's basically what a CEO does. Yeah. So have you guys done the test?
Yes. This is something which I get a lot. That okay, how we look like. So
yeah.
With brutal honesty, the first when we did the test, we had, in my opinion, and thinking retrospective, a massive hubris. that, we are a 5 out of 5 star team. We are so good. I mean,
Right.
personally, I was involved in many, startups in the past. I founded companies. I was working for startups. I was working for corporate. I was working in VC. But the current team, what we are working together, this is the best in my life. So before we took the test, I was like, it's a 10 out of 10. I literally can't see. I physically can't see what could be wrong. And I was asking the others, what do you think? And Ben, who is our product guy, PhD in psychometrics, was like, look, I'm generally skeptical that we get a bad result, and not necessarily because we are a very good team. Don't get me wrong, we are a very good team in my opinion, but we just spent so much time building this product that unconsciously we know how to score the best.
Right, because you may answer the questions differently because you wrote the bloody.
This was his theory. This was his theory, and everybody started the test with a fair skepticism that first things first, how accurate it will be, and second, I mean, we are the best team. Come on, it will be a 10 out of 10, beyond the shadow of a doubt. And the first score what we ever had was 5.9.
Out of 10.
Massive disappointment. Massive disappointment.
And that's out of 10, right?
Out of 10, yeah. I mean,
okay.
if out of 100, possibly we wouldn't talk now. But the long story short, we get the report and we get the recommendations and the suggestions from the system. And what I'm particularly proud of, that over the next 3 months, we started to work on them. And one of the greatest recommendation what we had, and that's why, it's obviously it's our product, so it sounds cringy if I praise it too much, but this was my absolute favorite one. We had funnily enough, a really bad internal communication, because the information from one side of the team did not arrive flawlessly to the other. And the system detected it perfectly. And, it was our issue to figure out that, okay, but why is that? And I remember that, we went to the pub and I was like, okay, obviously it's not the result what we wanted, but this is just an excellent learning opportunity for us. Communication, what's happening? And you may or may not notice, but I have an ADHD, and just in brackets, I don't think I'm the easiest to work with guy ever, because I don't really like, typing stuff. If I have a chance, I give you a call, or I leave you a voice message, or do any of that. And thank goodness, all the platforms available for team communication, including Slack, so on and so forth. We use Slack. There are a wide variety of others. It allows you to leave just a voice message. And it was perfectly comfortable for me, because I don't need to type. I don't need to think about the bullet points. I just, leave a 1 or sometimes 5 minutes long message. But as it turned out, although everybody was accepting it, that, okay, Soma works in mysterious ways because of whatever reasons. But this was so inefficient as a communication, because, for example, I was doing a feedback session with an early customer. And after the session, I went on Slack and I was dictating all the sometimes 5 or 6 minutes long, voice message. And every single time when the product people, including Chris and Ben, they wanted to extract some information, they needed to listen my waffling once again. Yeah. And this really discouraged them to do it. And it was like, oh, I'm sure there's a very valuable feedback here, but you know what? I'm going to deal with it later. And we lost so much. We lost so much information. And it sounds as a trivial point, but until
it's a really good point.
Someone is pinpointing this to you, you don't really realize it. And since then, we are doing it differently, obviously. I changed my type of communication. They changed yours. We found the balance in the system to make sure it's comfortable for everybody. But the interesting bit here, once again, that this was not an issue which we ever spoke about, because the rest of the team was like, yeah, Soma works this way. And I try to cope with the situation, although it's not really comfortable for me, but it's like a 2 out of 10 discomfort. So I'm not going to speak about it, because I know that the guy is crazy. But long story short, the system pinpointed it. And we worked on it, we improve it, and now it's really great. Whenever I get the feedback, and if this is something which we can do in like a couple of days, we built in this feature like this. No information loss, no inaccuracies, no like lack of clarity that, okay, what the hell are we talking about? And there were like 10 or 15 of those steps in this report, which was an absolute goldmine opportunity for us basically to improve. So this was our experience with our product.
It's super interesting that you say that, because I remember having similar feedback myself, but this is going back a few years on communication, because I spent 15, 20 years or so of my early part of my career building and leading sales and marketing teams. And for sales teams specifically in leadership, like it's quick, it's fast paced, it's voice notes, it's a quick WhatsApp message. Hey man, have you thought about, maybe trying this approach and see if we can get the deal
classic.
Right. And in sales, that's what they want. The sales team thrives on that quick, efficient listening, and it works. When I started working with more product teams and tech teams, different approach. That doesn't work. And some of the immediate feedback I had was, you have to very clearly type out what your thought process is, make it bullet pointed, easy to read, to the point, make it clear what is priority, what is not priority, and that's kind of things. And it was a very different way of approaching it. And I'm so glad I did, because now as a CEO, I know that there are good forms of communication for some people, some teams, and good forms for others, but it's different across the board. So with my tech team and the more technically minded of my exec team, for example, that's one way I communicate. And also just for important stuff that I think we're going to want to come back to as well. That's super important. I'm not going to leave a voice note for something that I know we're going to need to come back to, because if otherwise no one can. Really, it's not as easy. Whereas, but then for other quick stuff like, can you change the logo color or something? I'm not going to, write that out. It's just like, you know what I mean? So, and it depends. And maybe it's a quick decision we need to make to do with a commercial thing or a pivot or whatever. Like, so there are certain things I think it's super interesting that you pointed that out, because it's, it's hard to know what you're doing right or wrong until someone just says, hey man, have you thought about the effects of that, the negative connotations of that? So what did you guys, what did you do it again? What did you guys score?
Yes.
So what did you get?
We do it normally in every quarter, just to monitor.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. So what was your most recent one? Come on, spill the tea. What was it?
So the last one was 7.3. The last one was 7.3.
Okay.
And what was interesting that, we spent 2.5 years in the so-called stealth mode, developing the product, gathering the data, and just making sure that ETA Technologies is ready for the commercial launch. And this February, I quit my job. I'm on the project full-time. The others are doing part-time. And it was so interesting to see that, while the product development happened, my contribution.
If you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please like, subscribe with notifications turned on, and let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. This lets YouTube know we are doing something right. Back to the show.
I don't know how to say that. He was quite humble. I was organizing, the test sessions. I was making sure that we are gathering the data. I was doing the customer interviews, which I already told you about. And I tried to have a smart face whenever they were presenting me that, okay, so this is how it looks like. This is what we're going to develop next week, so on and so forth. And I was like, it's very interesting. It's very interesting. So in February, basically, the whole dynamics shifted. Because so far, they were doing the heavy lifting. They were developing the product. The product was ready. It's my responsibility to sell. And that's why the system detected quite an immediate shift that, okay, from a mental health, from a well-being perspective, actually I became, I'm not saying more important, but, my weighting was significantly more as a full-time member. Meanwhile, they still remain part-time. And what previously we have seen that, they expected more involvement from my end, which is quite obvious because I'm not doing any coding, despite I have an IT degree, but trust me, it's better for the sake of humanity that I'm not doing any coding. That basically my involvement changed, which changed the complete dynamics in the team. So we are happy with the current arrangement. I see that there are a few areas for improvement, just to make sure that we don't have any issues with founder misalignment, which I don't know whether I was doing a very good job, making sure that everybody is on the same page. But every single time when we test, and every single time when we talk about that, where we are going, what we want to do, 5-year plan, 10-year plan, 15-year plan, everybody agrees that that's what I want to do, and that's what, as a result, we want to do together. The communication issue is completely solved, and I'm extremely proud of it. I'm extremely proud of it, because that required, obviously, a lot of compromise from my end. But once again, we managed to find the balance in the force, how to do it, which is comfortable, efficient, and doable for everybody.
Yeah. And have you got some sort of sense of, and well done, by the way, for getting that score up.
Yeah, doing our best.
Yeah, maybe everyone's just too scared. You know what I mean? Like, in your team to be misaligned. That's sometimes ruling with fear is a good tactic. But no, all jokes aside. So yeah, when you mentioned about like the initial score of the 5.6 or whatever it was you mentioned, like presumably you must have a pretty good idea of kind of a benchmark area of where you'd expect most good but not amazing sort of startups to be. Where do they sit on that sort of score out of 10? Is it usually the midway point? Is that kind of good but not great? Is that what you'd expect, or is it lower? Is it higher?
Let me explain to you that what the scoring is really means.
That'd probably be helpful.
That should reveal everything. So if we find that a team is scoring between 0 and 4, with all due respect, we call it dysfunctional, because you have wide variety of issues about control. Many times we see that founders are just always fighting against each other, that I'm the CEO, no, Greg, I'm the CEO, I'm gonna make the decision, so on and so forth, which is creating a really toxic environment. Everybody is feeling that, it's a project what I am involved, but I'm not really working on it. People are not doing 100%. People are many times uncomfortable, sharing issues. Just to get back to your point that I'm ruling with an iron fist in my team. That's absolutely not the case. I can assure you.
It's the only way that it can be done.
I think what my superpower is that. Because I'm well aware with my shortcomings, trust me. I make sure that everybody is contributing with 200%. And sometimes I'm not really a dictator, but rather I'm annoying, asking always the questions that, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? Do you think it's a good decision? Because I just want to get all the perspectives. And from my standpoint, where I'm sitting as a sales guy, CEO, basically such a different and such a unique perspective what a software engineer can give me, it's absolutely a goldmine opportunity. Anyway, back to the rating. So between 4 and 6-ish, 6.6-ish, we would say that the foundation of the team is quite stable, so you can build on it. However, we identified a couple of red flags. In our case, the red flag was beyond the shadow of a doubt, the communication. That from one side of the team to the other side, the information is just, not going there, just not getting there. It's not manifesting in the system. It's just stuck somewhere. Many times those red flags, what we identify, higher probability than normal to burnout. This is a big one. Interestingly enough, risk aversion, and not in a way how the public perceives the entrepreneur, because I met many people who say that, from a public perspective, entrepreneurs are gamblers. They take all this money from investors and they try to create whatever. In reality, 60% of the teams who we are testing, they have a major issue with their relationship with risk, but not because they are gamblers, because they are way too risk averse. And how interesting is that? Their resilience is not on the level where it should be. This is another major red flag that, you have a plan. and you stick to it, you're so stubborn that if anything is changing, and just look around, AI is changing everything in every day, every second a new feature come up on OpenAI, which is going to just erase your company. You need to be flexible, you need to be resilient. And in this category, many times we, between 4 and 6, many times we identify what I call as the super scientific trope, which means that people who are really smart, they are coming from academia, associate professors, PhD spinouts, and they just have way too much focus on the product development and polishing a molecule until the eternity, but not really generating sales, not even having a business acumen, a business plan. They mostly fall into this category. Between 6 and 8, this is what I call as quite a sweet spot, because once again the foundation is really stable. Somehow the entrepreneurs are managed to collaborate in a way that they are not just supporting each other, they are not just working together, but what we mentioned earlier, the entrepreneurial personas are in harmony. So everybody's contributing with their entrepreneurial talent, which is elevating the team to a whole next level.
They're getting the best out of each other.
Exactly. But there are some minor red flags or some minor issues. And in this case, I'm always saying to the investors that, look, you need to work on this team. It's not an easy ride that you just, like in a casino, put your money in and you win the jackpot. It's not this one. But I can give you a manual, what you need to improve, how to work with them, how to communicate with them, how to build a mutually beneficial relationship, which I guarantee it will turn this startup to something significantly bigger than what they even imagine about. And the last category, between 8 and 10, this is what we call as alchemists. Alchemists who are turning your money into gold.
I've got a good idea for what you should call it.
Please,
you should call it the Greg McCallum category.
You know what? I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. Just in brackets.
Or just yeah. And then just a link to my LinkedIn profile.
If you need to be good, you need to be like him. Sorry, if you're not him, that's immediately minus 2 of your points.
Yeah.
But look, we tested. I mean, we were extremely privileged testing a few Sunicorn and Unicorn valuation startups, and not by chance they were scoring 8.7, 9.1. I've never had a 10.
That's quite reassuring, really, isn't it? Because you can imagine if you were going to those organizations, they were getting like 4s and.
That would be it. I guess.
Yeah, that'd be a very difficult conversation with their.
But it's so funny that we tested some really good companies who scored quite low. So not with such a dramatic measurement how you describe it, but it happened. And we get back to them and we get back to their VCs saying that, look, I understand that possibly this is the flagship, product of your portfolio, but at the moment, the guys are this near to completely burn out. And I was absolutely amazed by the openness to criticism by the founder, because he sit down with us and said, look, this is a very important report. And let me explain to you that at the moment we are in a transition. 3 of my co-founders, they are leaving. 2 other guys are joining us. We are so disorganized. There is no word for it. I'm not going to say the name of the startup, because now they are back on track and they are growing like there is no tomorrow. But this unfortunate period when you tested us is absolute disastrous. And you guys did a very good job, painting this picture that yes, we are in trouble at the moment. But what I can recommend, that don't make a judgment based on this. Test us in 2 months, and in my opinion, if in 2 months we see the same numbers, we are in trouble.
That's a conversation, yeah.
And I was like, my goodness, I really like it. And he supported us a lot. But once again, they are back on track. But just to refer to your experience, yes, it happened once. And it was.
So then in the Greg McCallum 9 or 10s, what are the attributes there then? What are you looking for?
So basically, there are 5 of them. Number one, once again, a really strong and stable foundation. So they can work together. They know how to create synergistic support. They how to navigate. So there is a category called the steadfast composture level, which is basically that, if I saw anything on you, that, you are divorcing, your house is on fire, your kid is in hospital, how calm you can be to make the right decision. Now, they are stone cold Steve Austins. They are sitting there and, okay, everything is on fire, everything is burning down. How I can turn this massive failure into an opportunity. How I can make money out of the chaos. From a mental health perspective, they figured out something extremely special, because as I see, there are 2 types of startups. The one who are pushing it way too much, and maybe at the moment their numbers are amazing, but in 6 months' time, I guarantee that they go down because they burn out like there is no tomorrow. On the other note, there are the guys who are taking it as a part-time project, don't taking it very seriously, and they are like, yeah, I invest some, but on the other side, I really enjoy this balance that I have a full-time job, I get a good salary, a safety net, and I do this whatever is that, the startup is, a side project, side hustle, and I really like this limbo. These guys figured out that how to grow systematically, like 20% months on months, without burning yourself out, which is magical. And their entrepreneurial personas are so much in harmony that they literally, like in a good marriage, finishing each other's sentence. And last but not least, the cherry on the top, they're completely united by one vision. So if you ask any team members independently from the others, so not in the presence of the CEO, in the presence of the CTO, saying that where this company will be in 5 years, look, nobody sees the future, but as we are growing, I expect us to be here. This is the worst case scenario. This is the best case scenario. And you ask this independently from everybody, and they tell you the exact same trajectory. And they are flexible enough, they are resilient enough, so everybody is always ready for a pivot. So it doesn't matter how good things are going, they're always like, yeah, it's very good, I see a potential, but if I need to pivot, tell me when I need to pivot.
Yeah.
And
they can weather any storm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And they're really strong together, massive commitment. And just, checking all those boxes, what you expect from a unicorn.
Yeah.
Very rare. It comes without saying, Greg. Very rare. So your name is not going to show up much. I'm sorry, for the lack of advertisement. It's very rare as a category.
But it's something for people to aspire to,
Yeah. You're an inspiring man, Greg. Come on.
But we make the comparison a lot in this industry as well around, like co-founder relationships are like marriages, VC relationships like marriages. We use marriage a lot, right? I'd be curious to see a version of this for actual married couples, because I would love to do this with my wife, and see how we score as a team. Because I think we're a fucking amazing team. Constantly, my wife and I are talking about how aligned we are and how we've got the same vision for ourselves and our future and our family and all that kind of stuff. But I'd love to put it to the test. It might destroy our relationship, but it would be awesome to see. Maybe that could be a little side thing that you spin off,
I'm more happy to do a test, and if you find it's what you expected, we publish the report, and if not, we just burn it. Anyway,
I have to sign a contract that says I can't sue you.
I think first of all, I don't think it would work in a way how you expect, because the beauty of ETA that it is designed for entrepreneurs, and as much as a marriage.
What about entrepreneurs who are married?
For sure,
that would be interesting.
If that's your case, I'm happy to sign you up. Fill in the test.
No, but it is interesting, because I had who did I have on recently? Toby Kernon of Wagon X, and he's married, he's got kids, and both of them are entrepreneurs. And we talked a little bit in that episode. It's not out yet, but we talked a little bit in that episode about what it's like to be in a relationship as two serial entrepreneurs. A lot of entrepreneurs that I speak to, I'm sure it's the same with you, find it very difficult to maintain relationships, romantic relationships, or even friendships. And
that's what I wanted to say, even friendships, not just romantic, even friendships.
let alone a romantic endeavor, which is requires way more commitment, and then being a father and or a mother and everything like that on top of it too. It's massively interesting, to see, even if one person is an entrepreneur, in that dynamic. Because of the way of thinking that comes around it, the probable, inevitable, ADHD that's involved, and everything else as well, which I've been told I have multiple times, which I think is a common trait with a lot of entrepreneurs I've met as well.
let me tell you a really creepy example. Okay. Which actually happened to me. I've never been in. I've never did a business with my wife, because first thing first, I don't have a wife. But that's
the first step.
That's the first step. Yeah, you need the business and you need a wife, and after you can think about it. But with my CTO, Chris, we are long-term friends. We know each other for like 20 years. We went to the same high school. And when we started to work on the first ever startup what we had, we went through the good, bad, and the ugly, because it's really difficult to separate your normal human friendship and that, okay, we are co-founders and we need to focus. It's not just about hey, let's have a pint and let's chat. No, it's a business meeting, and I expect you to deliver, and I expect you to talk to me if you feel that I don't deliver. And these difficult conversations, there is an old saying which I'm a big believer, and this is coming from a romantic setup, that behind every good relationship there are a lot of difficult conversations. And I think it's 100% true with founders as well. It's not just marriage, it's 100% true with founders. And in the first few months when we started to work together, none of us took it that seriously. And that's why it was the project was dying, basically. And one day we sit down and I was like, look, no offense, but let's make a decision whether this is working. Because I have a sense, because we know each other for such a long time, we are very good friends, we can't really pressurize the other. There are a lot of deadlines what we missed, partially my fault, partially your fault, and every single time when we miss a deadline that, hey, this feature should be done, this client should be landed, and it didn't happen, it's the other person is like, hey, I know that you have a lot of issues now, uni is really hard, you know what, I forgive you, let's reschedule this deadline for next week, and hey, let's have a pint, shall we? Because I know there is a lot on your plate. Do you want to talk about it? Blah blah blah. And this relationship must transform into a really cold business type of conversation, where if you don't deliver, it doesn't matter how good friends we are, I must say to you, or you must tell me that, look, you are fired because you are not doing your job. You're not on the same level of enthusiasm where I expect you to be as a co-founder. I'm really sorry, but I feel that you're just not interested in this project anymore. And we established the boundaries, that how to separate it. And the project was back on track. We are making sales, boom, 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 boom. Everything is going up. And a few months later, after this conversation, we were chatting about it as a feedback session, that, okay, how it's working, that now we have a friendship, we are drinking in a pub, and we are also like colleagues. And Chris pointed out, which I never noticed, that it's so creepy that when you talk to me with your normal setup, as friends, your voice is different when you talk to me, in a business setup. Because when you talk to me in a business setup, it feels as a communication that you are more sophisticated, you have a deeper voice, and you speak just slower than your normal Soma. And I don't know whether you are doing it intentionally or not, but this little change helped me tremendous to separate these two types of my life. And I was like, First thing was, I have no idea I was doing it, but of course I was taking the credit that of course it's intentional. Come on, man, what did you expect? This is so. I think if you can find the boundaries, and the boundaries are different in every relationship. For you, it can be completely separate than for others, but you must talk about it openly. And I think this is a major red flag. early on if you can't talk about these boundaries openly because the other person feels that, I'm offended. How dare you saying
Oh well,
I'm.
then you can't. No, you can't work
Yeah,
like this.
it's just not
It's
going
as
to work.
simple as
It's
that.
just
No,
not going to
it's not
work.
going to work.
But
You
I went
you
through
can't be
it.
fragile in
Yeah,
this in any business. Like
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, no, but that is super interesting because now that you mention it, I think I do the same thing, and because quite often I'll listen back to notes that I've left for myself or recordings with team meetings and things like that, and I'll listen to myself and I'm like, wow, I sound really fucking intelligent in this meeting. and and then I know when I go for a pint with these guys, because of one of my well, they're all friends, but one specifically lives where I live, and we go for a drink every now and then. And I know when we meet and have a drink and talk, I talk absolute shit. I sound like an idiot. You know what I mean? But then whenever we talk business, yeah, there's kind of like a different shift. There's a mode that I get into. And I suppose that it is a bit more commanding. It is a little bit more to probably intentionally to make sure I'm more engaging, that I'm effectively communicating my idea. Whereas if I'm in the pub just having a beer, it's like we're just talking shit. It doesn't matter if you can entirely hear every detail of what I'm saying if I'm not communicating it properly. You know what I mean? So it's interesting you point that out. I never really considered that, but that's probably something that I do as well, and I imagine probably a lot of people do
Yeah.
as well with similar situations. So that's super interesting. Well, look, let's switch gears a little bit because of we've gone a bit over the usual time for part one, but that's not a problem.
No, my apology. My apology.
No. It's good. It's fine. There's not really. I don't have rules in this show, really. It's fine.
You make the rules, Greg. Come on.
Exactly. Yeah, it's my show. Do what the fuck I want. So yeah, we'll wrap up part one, allow you to go for a quick break and stuff like that. And then when we get back though, part two, which will be out in a couple of days for those that are watching, so subscribe and all that sort of stuff. Whatever you meant to do, I don't know. I would like to actually take a bit of a step back and hear a bit more about your journey, because we've kind of done it the wrong way around. Normally in my show, I start there and then we talk about the business. But hey, like I said, it's my show. We can do it the fuck we want. So yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's end of part one, and then in part two, yeah, I'd love to start to rewind the clock and talk about you and dive in a bit more on your journey, if that's okay. Does that sound good?
Pleasure. With pleasure.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that's the end of part two. No, part one. End of part one.
Thank you for listening and/or watching. Subscribe with notifications turned on to get notified when part two comes out. While you wait, please join in the conversation in the comments below.